Okay, so again, right off the bat here, we're going to be doing my overall thoughts on this beginning portion. We're then going to have a big spoiler section, and I do mean big in this case, as we're basically covering 11 episodes worth of material. There was 10 episodes, but the last episode is double-sized, so yeah, there's quite a bit to go through. So, okay. So, I guess this is Season 1 of X-Men 97. If it comes back, I know it's coming back, so I don't know if it'll be X-Men 98 next year, but anyway, X-Men 97 Season 1 gets an A. Very enjoyable. It definitely does a good job of advancing from the original animated series. It is definitely a TV-14 show. There's a hefty bit of swearing and a lot of adult themes in this that they obviously did not get away with on a Saturday morning kids show back in the 90s, but yeah, this is a definite good continuation of that. It does fix up a lot of the animation problems. I do like a lot of the characterization throughout all of this. If I do have any drawbacks, it's that the pacing of the show is just a little off. Some of the storylines feel a tiny bit rushed. Like, I understand they were probably working under the idea that they were only getting one season, so they had to try to do what they could to get their stories completed, but it just, like I said, it leads to a very rushed feeling without getting too much into spoilers. Likewise, you have basically an episode that didn't have enough material for an episode, so we have to take one episode that could have easily just been one episode and kind of stretch it into two, which is then split up by a filler episode. So again, it leads to an uneven feeling into the pacing sometimes. But still, overall, if you liked X-Men the Animated Series originally, you're going to like this one. So yeah, it gets an A.
Beware, the mutant-seeking sentinel.
Target identified. Mutant apprehended. Want to mix it up, big boy? My adamantine claws will get Rogue back. I've always had trouble with man. My optic blast will give him trouble. Firing projectile arm. Now, Sentinel, you will be defeated.
Sentinel robot playset and X-Men action figures, each sold separately.
Men, Wolverine's got a tiger twist, stripes, and spring-out claws. The Iceman comes on his ice board with color change icicles. Sabretooth's equipped with wounds that heal easily, an extra slashing claw, and glow-in-the-dark eyes and mouth. Here's Forge with his quick-draw gun action. Look out! And Mr. Sinister with his light-up chest. These aren't ordinary men. They're X-Men figures, each sold separately from Toy Biz.
Okay, again, this is the spoiler section, so yeah, it's going to be long. You need to skip to probably this point if you wish to avoid everything, alright? Okay, so yeah, like I said, this is 10 episodes long technically, but again, the last episode is double size, so it's more like 11. So yeah, basically where we left off in the original X-Men animated series, the final episode saw an assassination attempt on Charles Xavier as he was about to deliver an address to the United Nations. I believe they were, I don't know if they were quite appealing for Genosha to be admitted just yet, but that is a plot thread in this. But yeah, Henry Gyrick, who is of the Friends of Humanity, attempted to kill him. Gyrick was arrested. It looked like Professor Xavier has died. However, the Shi'ar actually came to rescue him, but they needed to take him away for the X-Men. And the world effectively does not know that Xavier is with the Shi'ar. They think he is dead. And we jump to months after that. We see Roberto da Costa, a.k.a. Sunspot, being hunted down by the Friends of Humanity. The X-Men come down to his aid. This is where we get the Cyclops not joke again. And through that, we get, like I said, through that, Roberto hits it off with Jubilee. He gets taken back to the mansion. And, you know, Cyclops is kind of feeling the strain. He's found out Jean's pregnant. Jean's very pregnant now. There's talks of them moving, like maybe they need to move out of the mansion. There does seem to be a feeling amongst the team that, yeah, Cyclops maybe needs to step down as this is not a world to raise a kid in, that they're going to have to stay out of it. But, you know, again, Cyclops still is trying to be the leader, and he's still trying to do both things, basically. And then from there, you know, he's taking the others to task for, you know, Gambit and Rogue were not part of this rescue operation, and he kind of takes them to task over it. And sort of through all that, like I said, Roberto, who is a trust fund baby from Brazil, he is trying to, he eventually tries to leave again and live on his own, gets tracked down by the Friends of Humanity again. They also have figured out the Friends of Humanity are using old Sentinel technology. They don't know exactly where that's from. So after they rescue Roberto a second time, they go after Gyrick and have Jean read his mind to track down where Boulevard Trask was. He's the guy who constructed the Sentinels, and he has rebuilt Master Mold, who hopefully won't turn against him. Probably will turn against him at some point. They're basically in the middle of the Sahara Desert. They're constructing new Sentinels. They have to lead to take that out and bring Trask to justice. However, there's a bit more to that as we get on. They then return to the mansion to find Magneto waiting there to inform them that technically in his last will and testament, Charles Xavier left control of the X-Men to Magneto. So they are now his team. Now this kind of dovetails into the next episode where, again, it seems that this leads into the next episode where Magneto helps out when the Coney Island Ferris wheel gets stuck, and people are wondering, like, why is he now with the X-Men? He's a terrorist. There's the general consensus that he needs to testify before the UN to prove that he is on the up and up. He says, look, you know, my friend is gone. I wish to continue his dream. I've done some terrible things. I'm willing to make up for it. I am on the clear. As this happens, the Friends of Humanity attack, and one of them has a gun built to neutralize mutant abilities, and this person winds up trying to shoot Magneto. However, Storm winds up taking the blast and losing her powers. Added to that, you know, this is now making things even more stressful to the X-Men, as Cyclops is now suddenly feeling like, hey, Xavier didn't even trust me to stay with the team when he was gone. Now he's given up control of that. And so, as this is at, which is also leading further credence to, yeah, maybe, you know, Jean's right, and we do need to leave the mansion and be on our own. And also, you know, it seems like I haven't talked much about Morph and Bishop. It's that they don't really do much this season. I know Morph being non-binary now, so I have to try to remember to say they, them, but that really only comes up in one line throughout this whole show. And very early on, it's the idea that Bishop's time travel device got broken, and Beast is working on trying to repair it as best he can. But kind of in the middle of all of this, Jean goes into labor. Scott has to go attend to Jean while Magneto deals with the UN more. He finally lifts he says, you know, finally, you know, after seeing what happened to Storm, he snaps. He lifts the whole tribunal up into this atmosphere, and he says, look, I have looked down on this world. I understand that there are so many people, and, you know, not all of them are bad, but if we're going to, you know, you have to let me try to prove that I can do this. And so they give him basically a temporary restraint from that, and they agree to look into admitting Genosha as a mutant nation. And this will pay off a little bit later. As this is happening, it turns out that Rogue and Magneto have a bit of a past, and it's a romantic one. Basically, you know, it happens a few episodes later, but I'll say what it is now, which is Rogue reveals that Mystique took her to Magneto. He was educating her as best he could, and he just, as they began to grow fond of each other, he realized that he can touch her without her powers being activated, and so they could actually carry a relationship out. And from there, so this is obviously driving a wedge between Rogue and Gambit and their relationship. and that's starting to cause even more friction. After that, we have Jean giving birth to Nathan, a son, and shortly after they return home from the hospital, another Jean suddenly appears at the door, and this is causing a lot of confusion. And they, Beast tests their DNA of this Jean that was just pregnant and this Jean that just showed up, and it turns out the one who just showed up is Jean Grey, and this other one is a clone of some type, and they don't know who exactly is behind it. And Jean, it's Madeline Pryor. Okay, they're doing the Inferno storyline. I'm going to be referring to, excuse me, I'm going to be referring to Nathan Summers, Cable's mother, as Madeline from this point on. And Madeline gets upset and thinks everyone's kind of turning against her and has forgotten her. And so, she starts kind of losing control. This is where Mr. Sinister reveals that he's behind everything. He gets her to give in to her darker side, and she becomes the Goblin Queen and kidnaps Nathan so that Sinister can begin doing tests on him. And it's eventually from this where, again, Jean is sort of out of it because her memories have been tampered with, so she doesn't know she doesn't even know how long she's been out. She's obviously been out long enough for Madeline to have gotten pregnant, but she doesn't know if she's the one who married Scott or not, or, their memories are all mucked up. This leads to a big confrontation. Nathan is placed in a special chamber so that, I think what it is Sinister trying to isolate the DNA so he can create an army of super soldier mutants, for lack of a better term. And we'll get to that when we get there. But as this is happening, like I said, the big confrontation is happening. Finally, Jean, at Logan's encouragement, manages to roust from her hospital bed to psychically reach out to Madeline and say, no, wait, we don't mean you harm. And they work to try to make peace. They realize Sinister is not the good guy. I mean, this guy literally called himself Sinister. But yeah, she turns on Sinister, scares him off. They free Nathan. However, it turns out that what Sinister had done basically was trying to hyperactivate Nathan's mutation and his immune system, because he thought he's so powerful, he's going to be this god-level mutant. I am going to infect him with this techno-organic virus. He'll fight it off, and thus I can take that DNA and use that to augment more mutant DNA and create these super mutants, basically, including himself. But they pulled him out too early, so his immune system can't properly fight it, and the only technology that could possibly save him is in the future. So Bishop takes his repaired time band, and much against Scott's wishes, Madeline says, no, we have to send him into the future to take care of things. At this point, Madeline leaves the X-Men. Also, Storm leaves the X-Men because she feels that she can't be a part of them without her powers. She winds up connecting with Forge, which, again, if you go through the original animated series, that continuity is so wonky sometimes. Because we have the Forge from the future who worked with Bishop. We have a Forge contemporary who ran X-Factor, but there was also now an old friend of Charles Xavier who's now willing to help Storm. And so it's like, every time he shows up, it's like we're reintroducing him. But yeah, she eventually hooks up with Forge in Texas. The two begin growing a relationship as he tries to restore her powers, though he does eventually let slip that he is the one who developed the technology for the neutralizer gun that was used on her. In the comics originally, a lot of these are from the comics. They really did hewn very close to them. Originally, though, in the comics, Forge also, I believe, was the one who used the gun on Storm. He was masked, but I think in this case they severed that connection a little bit more from it. But yeah, this leads to Storm being tormented by a demonic owl spirit. This is kind of like, I know they were trying to go for something here, but there are times. I'll get to it. I'm sorry. Yeah, they fight off this demonic owl spirit, and Forge was poisoned. She gets this antidote, and this is kind of the big test that gets her powers back. Also, Roberto and Jubilee wind up starting something of a romantic relationship. This is the episode that got kind of split up. Or one episode... Like, the main thrust of the first part of the Storm story is actually about Jubilee and Roberto getting trapped by Mojo in a video game. Because it's Jubilee's 18th birthday, and, you know, she said, hey, you know, I just kind of want to do what I usually do. Let's go hang out at the arcade. Magneto kind of says, no, that's not exactly, you know, becoming of an adult. Like, yeah. So yeah, what I was talking about with Jubilee and the video game consoles, that was like the first part of an episode. Then we got the first part of the Storm storyline, and then we got the big episode where kind of the everything hits the fan episode, which is Genosha is admitted as a mutant nation to the United Nations. They're setting up a government. They want Magneto to take over, basically. They said, this is, you know, we've set this up. We think you can be the best leader for this because you seem to know what's best for mutant kind. And, you know, he's reluctant, but he seems ready to, and he wants Rogue to rule beside him as essentially queen. He wouldn't be a king, but to be his wife, basically. This upsets Gambit. There's a whole lot of mutants there. Nightcrawler's there. Colossus is there. A few others. Most notably, the mutant Strong Guy, who was in the Peter David run of X Factor, but I can't say his actual name because it's a slur of Italian people, but yeah, he's there, and so it's like it's not quite, well, it's been happening recently in the comics with the Krakoa stuff, but it's pretty close to it. You know, they've got all this, you know, everyone's got a good life, everything's good, the Morlocks are accepted there, and just as it looks like Magneto is about to accept, these new sorry, phone goes off. Anyway, just as it looks like Magneto is about to accept, these Sentinels arrive and start attacking. They're new types of Sentinels. They start blowing things apart. It looks like Magneto gets killed and everything. Thousands of mutants get attacked. This is actually a storyline from Grant Morrison's new X-Men run. There's also a funny subplot in there as well, which is Madeline, even though she's left the X-Men, has actually been carrying on with Scott in something of a psychic affair. Jean has been feeling distant from Scott. She winds up kissing Wolverine. She kind of goes to confess things. She finds Scott and Madeline, you know, not quite having psychic sex, but, you know, in a definite, you know, romantic entanglement. And everyone gets upset, and then this is even further exacerbated when the attack happens, because Madeline was there on Genosha working as an advisor, and she gets killed, but not before she sees Cable returning to the present, trying to save her, and failing, and realizing who he is, that, yeah, he's Nathan. And, you know, again, this is where everything hits the fan. And in the midst of all this, like Rogue, Gambit, everyone at Nightcrawler are all moving to try to save as many mutants as they possibly can, and it's, you know, it's all just futile. Like I said, it looks like Magneto gets killed. Rogue snaps, starts attacking one of the Sentinels. It blasts her, but then Gambit intercedes, winds up getting impaled on a tentacle, which he then uses the last bit of his kinetic energy to transfer into, so he blows up the last Sentinel, which stops the attack, but of course Gambit winds up dying. Rogue is so upset she won't even attend Gambit's funeral. She basically goes on this march to try to find Trask and Gyrick and everything, and she finds Gyrick briefly. She has an encounter with Captain America, and, you know, he says, look, you know, he tries to talk her down, but it's like, look, there's aspects I need to know about this too, so, you know, let's try to work together. But it's like, but I can't have you killing Gyrick. And, you know, but that proves to be this breaking point. She does eventually track down Gyrick's whereabouts, She winds up absorbing his powers to put him into a coma to try to track down where Trask is. Turns out Trask is on Madripoor. Mr. Sinister freed him, and it turns out there's actually someone employing that's above Sinister. And, Trask, is now just fearing for his life. However, once he contacts the X-Men and it gets them to meet on Madripoor, he suddenly, he looks like he's about to jump and end his life. Rogue reaches out and grabs him and says, "No, wait, there has to be more information." He says, "No, I've given you everything." And she says, "Okay," and she lets him go. Basically, she's so upset over Gambit, she no longer views anti-killing. Yeah, she is no longer anti-killing, basically. And, coincidentally at this point, the big bad, who it turns out is Bastion, we'll get into that later, killed Gyrick, because he outlived his usefulness. And as this is happening, though, Trask appears to fall to his death. However, he suddenly returns to life, looking more like a Sentinel, and starts attacking the X-Men and mopping the floor with them, before Cable returns and takes him out with an EMP grenade. And it's here where we get most of the backstory on Bastion. It turns out that in Cable's future timeline, Bastion basically reworked the Sentinels and augmented humans into being very super powerful people who are above mutants. Mutants are still around, but only as slaves. The Sentinels are either attacking or neutralizing them, or basically taking them out. And boy, sorry, my notes are all over the place here. Anyway, the Sentinel, Bastion creates the Sentinels to augment humans. It makes human Sentinel hybrids, essentially, to take out mutants, and mutants, the ones who survive, are kept purely as slave labor. However, everything else is pretty much a utopia for humans. The X-Men go out looking for Bastion, who it turns out has Magneto still alive and being kept hostage. Also, we got a brief update on Charles Xavier, who's with Lilandra. They're engaged to be married. However, the Shi'ar are not accepting of this interloper, in particular Lilandra's sister, Deathbird. They don't trust him as a human. They don't want, he points out, the flaw of the Shi'ar Empire is you say you're saving it by making them part of your empire, but you're not. You're wiping out their cultures. You're just completely obliterating them. You're just not saying you're completely obliterating them. You're not helping them. You're actually doing more damage than good. And as this is happening, and as he starts about trying to actually educate them on how to do it properly in his way, but then suddenly he gets the vision of the attack on Genosha and realizes he has to go back to Earth, even if that means breaking up his engagement with Lilandra. However, it turns out some of these broadcasts got intercepted by the government, and Bastion, who starts putting out who puts it out on TV, and now no one trusts the X-Men anymore because it turns out Charles Xavier isn't dead, like they said he was. And as this is happening, it turns out Valerie Cooper had also been working with him, and it turns out to be a bad thing. The X-Men begin investigating more of what exactly Bastion is, and it turns out that when the future Sentinel Nimrod came back to the past to fighting Bishop, part of his artificial intelligence essentially bonded with a human janitor who is Bastion's father, who then fathered Bastion. So he is actually a human Sentinel hybrid mutant, essentially. And he's going to make these, like I said, augmented human Sentinels to hunt down, basically they're sleeper cell Sentinels, who, once they get into close quarters with the mutant, will activate and kill them. However, Valerie Cooper is starting to have second thoughts on this and seeing the destruction, and like obviously realizing that he's taking away these people's lives and again doing way more damage than good. She frees Magneto, who kind of lashes out and hits out a giant EMP, which takes out these augmented sentinels, causes them. As this was happening, there's like the sleeper cells are all activating all over the world. Magneto shuts it down with a massive EMP, however, that's completely disrupted the Earth's magnetic field, which means, everything is falling apart now. Xavier returns to, talk things out. He tries to get in contact with Magneto. Magneto's not really having any of it. He said, look, I gave them their chance. They screwed it up. They always screw it up. This has to be the breaking point. You have to realize this. Rogue agrees with them. Roberto agrees with them because they had been in Brazil at this point. Roberto and Jubilee had been in Brazil. Confessing his status as a mutant to his parents, who don't want him being public knowledge. And then as soon as it does get outed, because the Sentinels attack, they basically disown him. And he's like, my own parents turned against me. I can't trust humanity. Everyone, yeah. So he winds up joining Magneto. Magneto reconstructs Asteroid M. Basically, he's going to wait for this, for the Earth's magnetic field to completely denigrate and the planet to fall apart and be destroyed. So the X-Men have to basically split into two teams because Bastion is still running around augmenting Sentinels because he managed to somehow avoid. I don't know how he avoided the EMP. But this is when Storm and Forge rejoin. Bishop is still in the future at this point. Cable is around because he explains that he and Bishop got separated and he got flung into a further future, which we'll get to. But he is not accepting of Jean as his mother. He thinks Madeline Pryor is his mother. So he has this really strained relationship that the Cyclops is trying to patch up as best he can, but it's just not working. Basically a team of Jubilee, Nightcrawler, Cyclops, Wolverine, and one more. Xavier go to confront Magneto while Jean, Beast, Storm, and Forge go after Bastion. And this leads to a big fight with Magneto where he ultimately winds up ripping the adamantium from Logan's skeleton. However, as this is happening, Charles manages to get a blow to attack his mind and overtake it so he can commandeer it and reset the Earth's magnetic field to its proper state. However, this winds up reactivating all the Sentinels. And this also activates everything so that Earth can attack, which they reluctantly decide to do. And so Bastion is fighting. Mr. Sinister actually winds up possessing Cable at one point, getting him to attack Jean. However, eventually Jean is able to retap into the Phoenix Force. She unwinds all the DNA that Mr. Sinister injected into his genetic coding so that he hyperages. She puts a power neutralizer collar on Bastion, but it doesn't seem to affect him that much as he's able to rip off Cable's arm and basically use that to augment himself. And he goes to attack Asteroid M. They have to basically have, which leads to another big fight on Asteroid M. At this point, Xavier and Magneto are both comatose, and Xavier has to try to reassemble Magneto's mind as best he can in order to try to keep things down. This is eventually going to lead to the Onslaught storyline in Season 2, but we'll get to that, I guess. Yeah. Anyway, final battle happens. Eventually Cyclops decides, no, fighting isn't the right way. Let's try to see if we can reason with him. And Cyclops points out the truth. Xavier found out about Bastion and wanted him to be part of the X-Men, but Bastion's mother wouldn't let him leave and told Bastion that he was wrong for being a mutant, even though he effectively is a mutant. And he should have been part of the X-Men. It seems like it might have gotten through to him, but then there's like I said, that's when government attacks with some missiles that blow apart asteroid, that knock asteroid M down, and it starts falling back to the planet. It seems like Bastion is killed in the explosion. The rest of the X-Men have to basically work together to try to slow the descent as best they can. You know, Jean makes it back to there. Cable is back with Forge. He's because they need to patch him up, and and Jubilee and Sunspot get off the ship just in time to get back to Earth. And as this is happening, the others are all on there. They're trying to slow it down. It's not working. And then this is when Magneto finally seems healed enough that he reawakens. He seems to catch it and pull it back up into orbit. However, it then disappears. And the world now thinks the X-Men are dead. They're trying to track things down. However, Bishop then returns to the present to talk to Forge months later, and he says, the X-Men aren't dead. They've been scattered throughout the time stream. We need to try to hunt them down and reassemble them. We see that they're in the year 3900 AD. They meet a tribe of people called the Ascani, who have a very young man by the name of Nathan with them. This is the young Cable. So, yeah, that's Cable's tribe in the far future. Rogue and the others are in 3000 BCE, where they encounter a young mutant named Unsabanur, who's helping overthrow a corrupt warlord in Egypt. Unsabanur is the actual name of Apocalypse. And this all leads into a mid-credit scene where Apocalypse arrives on Genosha, and he sees Gambit's, one of Gambit's old playing cards, and he says, there's been so much death here. So, obviously, too, they're going to have Apocalypse come back and resurrect Gambit as one of his horsemen. Probably also Wolverine as well, because that's how that played out, too, eventually. So, yeah, they're definitely taking a lot from the comics in this. I know Bastion was a character from the comics, too, but that was the time I was really not reading X-Men. So, yeah. Rogue and Magneto being in a romantic relationship is also from the comics, in particular the Age of Apocalypse storyline, where it turns out they had a child. Like I said, other than that, yeah, so you're seeing a lot of that stuff. If I had a problem is, again, it does lead to a lot of rushed feelings, pacing in this, because they felt like they needed to wrap up so many stories to get to this big final 3-part story arc at the end, which is also technically a 4-part story arc because it's a double-sized episode again. I'm trying to get through this as best I can, folks. Sorry. But yeah, you can see where it's like that's where the whole pacing problem really did come up. And, you know, again, like, well, I do think you could do a good story with Onslaught. It's still an Onslaught story, so I don't know how much you're really going to be able to get away with. If you do not recall Onslaught, basically because Xavier and Magneto have shared their minds essentially and had to reassemble their minds kind of together. This winds up being a combination of Xavier's latent anger with the world and frustration with the world, and of course Magneto's hatred and frustration of the world. And it's the darker aspects of both men's personalities wind up merging into this being called Onslaught, who then runs roughshod throughout the Marvel Universe. It was not that great a storyline. And again, we're getting Apocalypse, which can also be a very ultra-powerful being to have to try to fight. I would like to... We do see more mutants popping up. I would like to see more of that. Both Gambit and Wolverine. Wolverine, if you don't remember the removal of the adamantium, he does have his bone claws still, which they didn't reveal at this. He was still basically in a coma throughout all of this. But then eventually he gets the morphine. Apocalypse puts the adamantium back on his grafts the adamantium back onto Logan's skeleton, which makes him the new Horseman of Death. Gambit was also a horseman at some point. I think he's also a Horseman of Death. So I don't know how that's entirely going to play out, but you could see how that could focus. So yeah, definitely a lot to build on for the future. I hope it does work out, and I am interested for more, so hopefully we can get some quickly.
X-Men Origins Wolverine. Wolverine Electronic Claws. Comes with 1 claw. Additional claws sold separately. Batteries not included.
The evil mutants must be. Magneto's power traps Cyclops.
Gotcha!
Lightning lights up the sky. The Cyclops is out to power within. With the flaring X-Cycle. Claw flashing Wolverine cuts evil. Size. X-Men figures and X-Cycle. Each sold separately. Not included.
Okay, so after a very long summary there, the next video is going to be basically reviewing the now, as this has been uploaded, released NFL schedule. We're not doing the preseason games or anything like that. It's going to be Ramblings with Men, and then after that it's going to be the random trade review on Usagi Yojimbo, the Dragon Bellow Conspiracy. I have mostly scripted that, so hopefully it won't be too delayed. See you all next time. Hey guys, remember you can request a movie or a television series for me to review at my Patreon at patreon.com/sleepytime for Cat Productions. Also, remember to like the video, comment, share, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so that you can be alerted to further videos.